Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is AJ McNamara. He's the Director of Managed Services at GDIT. AJ, good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Managed services changes over the decades. So why don't we start with a definition of managed services in the modern contemporary sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Managed services are really all about outcomes rather than paying for labor hours or hardware or software costs. What you're paying for is that outcome. And really, to adopt a managed service, what the provider is going to do is they're going to lead that client through a cultural change where they take on not only responsibility, but accountability for delivering to this well-defined set of outcomes. And accountability is really found a foundation to this. It really enables a true partnership.
And I guess it's implicit in the idea of the outcome-based thought of looking at this. But what are the benefits of modern managed services to federal agencies?
Yeah, the biggest benefit of managed services to federal agencies is their ability to focus on their mission rather than running IT in this case. And there's some other really common benefits that include to transfer risk, drive innovation, and drive a predictable and often lower cost.
Got it. And let's maybe talk about some examples of the types of services that can drive these costs, drive these different types of outcomes.
Yeah, we offer a complete range of services from cyber to cloud to digital modernization. And some common managed services include service desk, security operations center as a service, network as a service. And let's just take an example of security operations center as a service. When we deliver that, we're not just delivering the people associated with it, we're delivering the complete set of tooling necessary such as a sim tool so that you can get to the outcome that you want. And as I was saying earlier, managed services are really not limited to just IT. It could be really anything. I think a good example of that is what we're doing with Arkansas contact tracing. So everyone's really familiar with the contact tracing operations across the US and across the world right now. And what we're doing is we're providing that for the state of Arkansas. We have over 350 people supporting this. And that includes people who are contact tracers, nurses. But at the end of the day, what the state of Arkansas is purchasing is contact tracing. And we're using some technology that we have available to us to make it such that when we're reaching out to potential contacts, we're being able to be much more successful at reaching them through texting them right before we call them so that they know that this is a legitimate call and that they're more likely to answer.
So, in many ways, you're providing a government function more than just a service that's a part of a function in that particular case. What are some of the technologies? What are some of the personnel requirements or assets that you bring to something like contract tracing, which is a pretty multi component type of activity?
Yeah, I mean, with contact tracing, like I mentioned, we're providing not only people who are doing the contact tracing, but the nurses who can understand the policies that the government has put out. But I think what we really look to do is how can we apply technology to deliver that in a more effective way? So we're using our automatic call distribution as a service offering and some key things that we've learned from contact center and running those for FEMA, for example, and other agencies.
Okay. And again, what would the benefits be then? This is this whole state of Arkansas. It comes out less expensive for them to do. And what are some of the other benefits you feel that they derive?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what they really want to do is help get COVID under control in their state. And what we're doing is we're just helping them to enable that functionality and they can focus on other initiatives like getting vaccines out.
Got it. What are some other examples? You mentioned help desk, network. How do some of those work?
With service desk and network as a service, for example, what we're really looking to do, I mean, I think this all goes back to the end of the day, what is the outcome that the client's looking to achieve? And truly understanding what that outcome is. So certainly we do provide service desk and network as a service as options. So for example, with network as a service, we provide LAN, WAN, MAN, Wi-Fi. So what you can do is you can focus on um, your mission instead of focusing on running the network. And I think another thing we often see with network is that oftentimes there's not investment made in networks because they're either working or not from a lot of people's perspective. And through putting this as a managed service, we can prioritize innovation and investment.
I see. So that would require then the agency to have a pretty clear idea of what the outcome it wants from that network. And when you talk about the different parts of the network, the local area network, the wide area network, the metropolitan area network, and so forth, each one of those has its own performance parameters and requirements, its own technology. So it sounds like a lot of upfront work is really necessary for that type of managed service to give everybody what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be, in order for managed services to truly be successful, there really needs to be a clear understanding of what the goals are, what's the why of doing this, and what are the outcomes that are being looked to achieve. If you just go into it thinking you can just outsource service desk, for example, um, you're not going to be successful unless you're actually thinking about the why. What are the measures that go into this to be successful? It's really important that all those are considered.
Yeah. So in the case of a network, for example, uptime might be one, throughput speeds. In the case of, say, a service desk, the number of calls resolved in a certain amount of time, those kinds of things. So I imagine one of your challenges as a provider is to kind of force the agency, the client, to make sure that they're really sharp on their requirements going in, or maybe say, when you have good requirements, let's talk some more.
Yeah, and that's not to jump too far ahead, but that's why we often look at transitional approach to adopting managed services as well, because oftentimes we appoint that service transition manager who acts as that person to help the agency through identifying what are the key metrics, key measures, as well as how do they value these different things, so that they're deriving the most value possible as
So
quickly
when
as
you say
possible.
transitional, that is to say step by step through service by service till you have a whole function, as we talked about, say, in contact tracing.
Exactly. Yes. It's really looking at what is that specific one outcome and what's the service or services that help support that.
So when you mentioned transitional services, the step by step approach, GDIT also has the concept of transformational managed services. So is that simply the sum of all the transitions in a given area, or can it be approached transformationally from the outset?
Yeah, I mean, we really have two different approaches just to kind of circle back to looking at how we adopt and help clients adopt managed services. One of them being transitional and one of them being transformational. So we talked a little bit about transitional. As far as transformational, the big thing is more that we're really taking an approach where what are the set of services or service that can be transformed into a new managed service delivery model in relatively short order. So for example, at the VA, we helped to transform 12 disparate help desks into one unified service desk, supporting more than 55,000 calls per week in what seemed like an overnight process to the users impacted. So that's really what transformational is, whereas transitional, is something that we're going at more service by service. It certainly could be that you're transforming a service as part of a transitional approach, overall transitional approach. You might see that more with like services that are considered low-hanging fruit. Service desk is usually one of those. But transitional is where you're taking generally a more slow approach to quickly to get buy-in and overcome barriers to change.
And in that example of a more transformational one where the service desk just flipped over basically one night, it must take a lot of groundwork before you flip that switch because, in a 55,000 call per week situation, you've got a lot of users, a lot of devices, a lot of software, and your call center could light up like a Christmas tree if everything's not in place the day that flips over. So, what are some of the foundational steps agencies need to make sure that they have in place and that they ask for from the managed service provider?
Yeah, it really does take a lot of planning. It's not something you can just Although our hope with transformational is that from an end user perspective, that nothing changed, right? It was, or very little changed. It was a very seamless change that they didn't really need to prepare for. It was just something that happened. But in order for that to be successful, it's not something that can just be done um, without serious planning and serious work, groundwork to take place. I mean, with the example of the VA, that was something that was planned for around 3 months to make sure that that first day was successful. I think depending on what the service is going to depend what is going to determine what kind of steps you should be taking. You know, with service desk, I mean, we generally look at it from three primary angles, one of them being the service desk and its people, the agents on the service desk itself, whereas as well as the ITSM platform, and then finally the automatic call distribution service, which enables that call-free number and then hopefully omni-channel support.
And is
So
one of the services or ancillary services, along with the direct help desk to the users, some output of metrics, dashboard type of information for the agency to know that they're getting what it is they're hoping they get from the standpoint of their users?
yeah, metrics are crucial, and all comes back to outcomes. You know, like we were talking about earlier. What are the goals you're looking to achieve? What are the outcomes? I mean, we do have certainly certain services or certain metrics that are common across specific services. So, you know, like I think you mentioned earlier that service desk, you might be interested on how many people are calling, maybe the average speed of answer, for example, is another metric you might be really interested in, how fast that people are answering the phone, how many times people are resolving that initial call and in that initial call. Those are some really common metrics.
And I imagine looking at the metrics over time, the agency gets some real good insight into where the pressure points are, and that working with, say, a GDIT, they can resolve those, and maybe it goes down to 50,000 calls or 40,000 calls.
Yeah, I mean, with service desk, one of the key things we really look at is a concept called shift left service desk, where we're really aiming to move calls that we're getting to self-service options, or to frankly be incidents that never even happen at all. Um, I think another key thing is over time, you should be constantly evaluating these measures that you have. What might be good one year might not be a very good metric the next year. So it's something that should probably be being reviewed annually or some regular basis.
I guess nothing in this life is set and forget. On that note, we'll take a short break. My guest is AJ McNamara, the Director of Managed Services at GDIT. And I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This is Federal Insights, part of the Digital Modernization series discussing managed services, sponsored by GDIT here on Federal News Network.